Hi everyone, today I am going to be drawing this orange lily using colored pencils on Strathmore Bristol Smooth Paper. For this drawing I used a combination of Prismacolor and Polychromos, and I blended everything with a solvent called Gamsol Odorless Mineral Spirits. That's the brand that I used. You can see me starting out here drawing the stamens for this flower. I always like to start by drawing the stamens. If there are stamens on a flower, I like to draw them first. I feel like it's a lot easier to draw them in and work around them than to try to leave those areas blank while I am drawing the petals. So anytime I have stamens on a flower, I'm going to draw those in first, and then I can always come back and add some details to them or darken them or lighten them as needed once the rest of the flower is drawn in, but it helps a lot to get those drawn in first. So that's what I'm doing. I am leaving the tips of those stamens blank. I got the little outlines done, but those are going to be drawn with black, and I waited until the very end to draw the ends of those stamens just because I didn't want the black pencil to smear onto my bright orange flowers. So that is what you can see there. Here I'm coming back with my second layers of pencil. I blended everything with the solvent and now just smoothing it all out. Really easy to do. This is a beginner tutorial over on my Patreon site, and I think you'll be able to see why. It's just a lot of smooth blending, not that difficult. Anybody can do this. Now you can see me starting to work on the first petal for this drawing, and I have my reference image pulled up on my phone next to me there, just because I think it's fun to see it come together, see what it looks like in the different stages as compared to the reference image or what I'm ultimately kind of going for here. I did this as a little bit of a trial. I want to see what everybody thinks. So if you like being able to see that reference right next to the drawing as I'm working, let me know. I did remove it for the remaining petals. I just think it's kind of fun to see how it comes together. I started off all of these drawings by blocking in the shadows as much as possible, and then I came through with the lighter yellows and oranges. I was using a lot of the Polychromos orange glaze, which is very similar to the Prismacolor orange. And then I was using also quite a bit of middle cadmium red from the Polychromos, which is fairly comparable to the crimson, was the counterpart to that pencil in the Prismacolor that I was using. In my tutorial series, I give options for luminance pencils, Caran d'Ache luminance, as well as Derwent Lightfast pencils. So here you can see me blending this all with Gamsol, and I have the Gamsol in a little jar next to me and an old washcloth that every time I put the Gamsol into the jar, I will dab it off on the washcloth just to make sure the brush isn't too wet with the solvent when I blend. And after the Gamsol has dried, I can go ahead and come through with my second layers of pencil, which you can see me doing here. Usually let that dry depending on how much solvent is on the paper and what kind of paper I am using, somewhere between 10 and 30 minutes. It's a good time to either take a break or work on another part of your drawing. And in these second layers, I'm just coming back through and getting everything really nice and smooth. Adding the details here now using the black pencil. I used a black Polychromos and a black Prismacolor, also a walnut brown Polychromos and a dark umber Prismacolor. I ended up smearing the black from those spots just a little bit. And so in the remaining petals, I made sure that adding the black details was the very last thing that I did. All right, moving on to petal number 2. I also drew this one in real time for my Patreon tutorial series. So if this is moving way too fast for you, you can go over there and watch the first 2 petals in real time as well as the stamens. Just blocking everything in. Looks very sad right now. This would be the time that a lot of people would give up because you couldn't imagine that it could go from this to looking like something that you would be happy with, but you just have to keep layering. That's the process. All of my drawings start off with that. If it looked great from the very start, then it would already be done. So it's just done when you're happy with it. And blending that all out with the solvent. This particular petal didn't have near as much shadow in it as the first one. They were all slightly different. I still drew them in the same basic order. I just had more shadow areas to put in on the first petal. Working through with some of those polychromos. There's a crimson red from Prismacolor. Want to make sure any of the lines that you add in there, like the veiny lines that you can see me put in there, you want to make sure that they are curving in the right direction. Just look over at your reference image, but those are what's going to give some shape to those petals and make this look more three-dimensional. Now it's just really coming together and starting to look smooth. When I draw with the waxy pencils on this Strathmore Bristol Smooth Paper, it just almost looks like paint. It's just very smooth. You don't notice any graininess that you might associate with pencils. And now adding in the pattern. Very easy to do. That was just me talking on the tutorial there a little bit. Now moving on to the next petal, again starting it the exact same way, starting with the shadows, getting those lines blocked in, just working through and familiarizing myself with where everything was going to be, constantly looking back and forth between my drawing and my reference image, just making sure that I'm putting the shadows where they're supposed to be. And you know, I'm being fairly careful with that. They do not have to be perfect. These are flowers. I'm not drawing a face or an animal. If you're doing that, you're going to have to be a lot more careful. But for flowers, most of the time, you just need to get it close. Adding some yellow underneath there for some brightness. This flower was, probably one of the brightest things I've ever drawn. Just a very bright orange, almost fluorescent. Getting some of that brighter poppy red in here. Used a lot of the poppy red and orange from Prismacolor. Also yellowed orange and sunburst yellow. There's the orange. Really nice, pretty color, similar to the Polychromos orange glaze. Just building up enough pigment on the paper here so that I'm ready to blend. If you don't like using solvent and you're not using solvent and you want to try to draw something like this, I would just keep blending over this with the pencils. Eventually you're going to be able to get rid of any of the graininess from the paper just by blending with the pencils, especially the soft waxy pencils. Adding a touch of green there and the walnut brown around the center area was slightly darker. Edging everything out. I like to have really nice sharp edges. Being careful to maintain the white of the paper. I'm using a piece of glassine underneath my hand, which is kind of like wax paper, but really should have something under your hand to keep your hand from smearing over the colored pencil. It helped that I was working in the direction here to keep my hand off of what I was working on. And now filling in the ends of those stamens. Again, that's going to be the last thing I do here, and adding some of the patterning. And 2 more petals to go. Just worked through them one at a time. Another way to work on this drawing would have been to add all of the shadows all at once and all of the highlights all at once, and then come through with the midtones and blend everything out. That's another way that I often work. I drew this flower pretty large. You can see in comparison to my hand, this is a big flower. And so I thought it would be nice just to work through these petals one by one. Also, the nature of the tutorial, it made it easier for me to explain through what I was doing and when. Adding some shadow here now with some of those more brownish pencils. I used Venetian red and Indian red and Sanguine from Polychromos and Pumpkin from Prismacolor to get more of those brownish shadows, balancing out some of those bright colors just a little bit. This reference is drawn based on a photo that I took of a lily that was growing in my backyard, and I did enhance the photo quite a bit. The actual flower was not near this bright. Still really pretty, but it's fun for a drawing to just really play around with some of those super bright colors. Lots of layers. And now blending over everything with solvent. Can see most of the white of the paper is going to disappear when I do that, leaving me with a really nice smooth base for my second layers. You can reapply solvent as much as you need to. Normally I just do 1 layer of solvent, but occasionally I'll come back in with a little bit more. Mixing the pumpkin with the poppy on that shadow area. Just blend over everything. Don't be afraid to go straight over the shadows with your lighter colors. And finally adding the black details here. Just kind of eyeballing where those are supposed to go. Again, just getting them close. And my final petal. You can see what I was talking about, smearing the black details there. The petal in the upper left, I smeared some of the dots there just a bit as compared to the one on the right where all those dots look really nice and sharp. So make those black details be the very last thing you do on this one. Coming over with some of that orange glaze, again just going over everything, constantly blending pencils together. I was just saying in my last tutorial that I always say I blend with solvent, but I also blend with the pencils basically non-stop. That's all you're doing basically, layering and layering pencils together. The solvent's just kind of an accelerant. It just dissolves the pigment, makes everything nice and smooth. And then adding my final layers to this petal. And finishing out with these final details. Going over the edges of all of these petals with the walnut brown from Polychromos, just to give a nice finish there. And that is just about it for this one. Like I said, if you are interested in learning how to draw this yourself, if this video went way too fast, you can head over to my Patreon and check that out. For $7 a month, I have over 200 video tutorials that are available for immediate access when you sign up, including this drawing. So I will see you over there if you're interested in that. Otherwise, I will be back with another video here on YouTube. Bye, everybody.